So the Duke versus Kentucky game had a close ending. Kentucky came back and they pulled off the victory. Kentucky played better defense than Duke. Duke shot the ball from 3 point line 17%, I think is what it was, and Kentucky shot it at 40%. Um, but I think the issue that's really hurting college basketball um, is playing neutral site games instead of teams actually going on the road. So in the 2023-2024 season, looking at Power Six, and this is when the Pac-12, was still a conference. Those teams in those conferences, when you look at their schedule by percentage, 27% of their games, non-conference games, were neutral site games. 10% were true road games, and 62% were home games. So like last night, ESPN is selling this narrative of the SEC having 9 ranked teams, and how strong the SEC conference is, and this could actually play out to be true. The SEC conference could actually be really tough conference. Could be the best conference in college basketball. I don't know. Um, it's difficult to say that, especially in the age of NIL and the transfer portal, because a lot of these teams are made up of new rosters, the new starters, new bench players. Um, so what you see is new teams being put together with lack of practice time. There's a lack of cohesiveness. There is a lack of fluidity. At times last night in that Kentucky Duke game, there was just a lack of ball movement. It was very stagnant. Um, you had players who don't really have defined roles, trying to do things that they probably shouldn't be doing. You have players who should be getting the ball, not getting the ball. And I mean, and this is something that gets worked out, obviously, as the season goes along. And judging a team in November and saying that this is what they're going to be in like March, it's not fair to those teams. But what you're not seeing, though, is you're not seeing a lot of teams that are returning a core group that has played together, that knows their roles, that can be efficient and can be fluid. Um, and then college basketball as a whole right now, because there's such a control element to it from the coaches. You see a lot of just sets being called, and there's not a lot in terms of like fluidity offenses where you have players reading and reacting. And so the game is played at a much lower pace. You don't get up and down, which is what college basketball is basketball as a whole. What makes basketball fun is just getting up and down, right? But also just the ball movement, the ball sipping, the ball flying, bodies moving, backdoors, all of those things, even with the modern spacing and the usage of the pick and roll and how influential it has become. Just still like there's an aesthetic beauty to a continuity office where players are reading and reacting, and they can do that because they've been together for a while and they know how to make those reads and know how to work together with one another. But so you're not really having that with the transfer portal era and the NIL. But I think the biggest factor that's hurting college basketball is that these teams that are ranked, and the purpose of those rankings are to sell those matchups, right? Because what they want to do is they want to bring eyes to these matchups, and you got to give these teams credit for going out and playing the Dukes and the Kentuckys and all of these things. But all of these games are played on neutral sites, so you don't have, you know, those the other element that makes college basketball fun, which is those ruckus home crowds. You don't have the fans being crazy and ecstatic, and all of these games are just neutral site games because these teams don't want to go and they don't want to play true road games. Um, so I think it would be more fun to watch Duke play at Lexington and watch Kentucky play at Durham. It would be more fun to have these matchups be at true road games instead of neutral site games. But they're not, and so March Madness is fun. And what you have in March Madness is you have teams that have been together for a while. They've played games. They've ironed out things, and the basketball is just so much better. But if you're going to sell these matchups, you got to get rid of these neutral site games. Like teams have to go out and they have to be willing to go on the road. Like playing in Atlanta when the two teams are not Atlanta teams is it's not fun. Um, what makes college basketball fun is the home crowds. And if you're gonna take away the home crowds, then what you're gonna have is these games being played in this like dark, taverns and with just not much excitement and stagnant play. And I don't know, it's not appealing and it's not interesting. And so I think college basketball really needs to rethink how they do it on conference, and I think that there needs to be more value being placed on playing neutral site games instead of just saying, "Hey, well, they played so and so in November. Did they play them at their place? Did they actually go on the road and play a true road game?" Because a neutral site game is not that. And you can sell that, and the pundits can sit there and they could be like, "Oh, well, Kentucky played Duke." They didn't play each other at their home crowd with their home fans, you know, and they played each other with rosters that are pretty much new. Um, and so the quality of basketball is just not very good. The product is not very good. There's no excitement, and the game is stagnant. So, if we're gonna host teams in March, um, and we're gonna fall back to this narrative of like, well, they went out and they played Duke and Kentucky and North Carolina and blah 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 blah, but they didn't do it in true road games as a true road game. Like, we got to take that into consideration. We got to devalue those games being played because we need to see more true road games in order to sell these matchups. I mean, that's what I think.